listening to the Honey Tomato podcast. We'll be talking about webcomics, manga, video games, and other related topics on our show. Thank you for tuning in. Today is April 15th, 2016, and this is episode number 1.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm a design student and traditional artist, and this is my co-host Helen.
Hi, I'm a pixel artist and writer.
Today's sponsor is no one, so if you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, please tweet at us at MilkyTart on Twitter.
So this week's featured webcomic is Riceboy, a brightly colored and surreal fantasy adventure story set in the 9th century of the Red Age of Overside. And I took that quote exactly from the website, which is rice-boy.com. And it's created and drawn completely by Evan Dahm, an illustrator and comic writer residing in Brooklyn, New York. So I really love Riceboy. I think it has a beautiful color palette. It has mysterious and enticing characters, and my favorite is TOE, which stands for The One Electronic. So he's got like a 1984 Orwellian look, and he has a pipe, and his face has, it is basically a television screen, and it changes depending on the scene. Yeah, so what is your opinion on Riceboy?
So I've read about 2 books worth or so of it, and I personally find the atmosphere to be pretty amazing. The as you said, the color palette is pretty impressive. Like, the colors themselves, it's not that the style is like very detailed. All the characters are very like striking, but they're sort of simply drawn.
Right. And
so a lot of how you see the world comes from like the color palette and also like the very striking character designs. And since you were talking about TOE, he's one of the most probably one of the most interesting characters I've seen, because like the images that are sort of shown on his television screen head, like as you know, as you said, they change from scene to scene. Even though each character has like a very striking design, I feel like the author used like that thing about him, like his changing visage,
yes,
like very interestingly. So like
right,
different scenes like came across much differently depending on what sort of I think he used a lot of like old actors too, which I thought was kind of interesting to be on the screen. Yeah, so I recognized gosh, who was on there? I feel like Cary Grant, and there's like different like sort of old like 40s and 50s actors, I think. And then there was a couple scenes where it really came across very like there was like a really powerful it's kind of a little bit of a spoiler, but one of the characters dies, and I think like you see sort of static on his face, and I felt that was like a very powerful image. So there's several scenes like that really set Riceboy apart in terms of its sort of visual style.
Absolutely. And in terms of how long the work is, it's extremely long, but it doesn't seem to take up like a huge portion of your time. Time just flies by.
Definitely. And it's it's really a really nice, easy read, but also very like engaging.
Right, for sure. And for me personally, Riceboy is a lot about self-discovery, and I read it kind of like in the mornings and at night, and it was over a span of around 3 days, so it's not like I paced it out really well. I just like I read it when I woke up, and I was like, man, I really need to read it before I go to bed. And I didn't really pick up a lot on specifics of like a moral of a story. And I don't really think it's about that. I mostly just enjoyed the atmosphere and the environment itself. So for anyone who's already read Riceboy, there's a rerun with commentary that's going on live, or not live, goodness, but it's going on almost every day by Evan, and it's at riceboycomic.tumblr.com. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, for sure. And in other webcomic related news, so it's finally happened. Homestuck has ended after 7 long years and 800,000 words, according to the readmspa.org site. Homestuck is finished forever.
It's done.
It's done. It is dead in the ground, which is pretty wild, because, yeah. So the Homestuck ending was taken sort of, I don't want to say controversially, but there was definitely, I saw a couple mixed opinions about it. So I guess I'll try not to spoil the ending, but I guess for those of you who are unfamiliar with Homestuck, though I'm sure probably some of you have at least heard of it, gosh, how do you even explain it? I guess it's like the story of like a a boy who's stuck, quote unquote, in his room, and he wants to play this game called Spurb, S-B-U-R-B.
Spurb.
And he sort of, and I guess from there it just becomes like this. It's hard to explain it without like going into all these crazy details that happen, but suffice to say, it's incredibly long. It's very interesting if you haven't even looked at it, because it does go in, like, the author Andrew Hussey experimented a lot while he was making it, so the story is told through all sorts of different mediums. Like, there's a lot of there's sort of video game segments in it, and like animated segments, and
tiny shortcut scenes.
Yep.
All those kind of like movie clips, and I think it's kind of like I don't really know if you're really just starting on Homestuck and you have no idea going in, you probably will get a little bit lost, and you really have to hold on tight to that train at least the first part, because a good 100 pages, because it's, you don't know where the story's going, the characters, you're just like slowly trying to decipher who they are through the text, and that takes time.
Yep.
And I just want to mention a little point is it's very dream-like. Also, this work, it has this aspect about totems, and it's not really a spoiler because you don't really know what's connected to, and it's kind of like, you know, other than Homestuck, when have you heard of the word totem and used in a work? It's never really mentioned at all. So it's it has that element of like sporadic nonsense, I think. It's
definitely like, it's hard to explain sort of what the appeal of Homestuck is, because it's like, I feel like it's very like, I don't know, so I was trying to but I was trying to catch up on Homestuck before the end. Gosh, no, I don't think I could ever reread it. Like, even reading it is quite a challenge.
Absolutely.
Rereading it would probably take me years. But as I was like sort of catching up on it before the big ending, I really, you know, it's incredibly long, super verbose. Like, the chat logs that there is between characters is probably probably what people like the most about Homestuck too, because I think everyone likes the characters and like reading the character interactions and stuff, but they're so long that it's like they can be, it's pretty hard. It's like not a super easily like accessible work in that regard, but I do agree there's like a lot of like sort of, I want to say it's like almost like internet mythology or something, you know, like there's all this like crazy stuff that happens, but it's like it's sort of familiar to people who've spent a lot of time on the internet too. So there's like all these RPG references and all these like references to old sort of meme culture type things. So it's definitely sort of like an interesting mixture of those things in that regard. But yeah, so I personally was definitely like sort of in the trenches for it. Like, I was big on Homestuck way back in like 2010 to 2013, back when the Homestuck fandom is still pretty big, but like back when it was like really one of the biggest webcomic followings like ever.
Right.
And I think a lot of people just really liked like how sprawling it is, and how like the characters are also pretty interesting and, you know, likable or not likable depending on your interpretation, but definitely I think like something about it just like inspired like a ton of people. So it's definitely like, if you haven't even looked at it, I would recommend giving it a look, but it is very, very long, and I mean, in my opinion, the ending was a little bit like, I mean, I don't want to say that it was lackluster, because it was incredibly impressive, like almost studio animated, like, or not even almost. It looked like it was animated by like a studio, like a professional studio, and a lot of people made the joke, oh, Homestuck has finally become the anime that it would it dreamed to be, which, you know, I mean, it definitely looks like that sort of caliber. Like, it was very impressive. But I think, like, at least in my opinion, having it end on guest art like that, like, it felt like it was too disconnected from what the rest of Homestuck was in some regards. So I would have almost liked for it to have a little more closure, because the ending felt a little bit too open-ended. Right.
And I remember you talking about how you would have enjoyed a parallel between the beginning and the end, kind of like a round circle.
Yeah, I would have, yeah, because I think the problem with Homestuck is that it is really a huge, huge story. Like, as I said, it's 800,000 words, and that doesn't even count all the video game aspects and, like, the sort of non-spoken animations and things like that, which were also a huge part of the story. And within the story, there's, like, a cast of, like, probably hundreds or thousands, depending on how you interpret it. But I mean, like, you know, obviously of people that speak, it's like, you know, I think, well, around 100-ish or so.
That's incredible.
It's like, yeah, definitely quite a few. And each, like, it's hard to say, oh, each character should, like, each character should have, like, a totally 100% full closure that everyone would enjoy, because of course that's impossible. Mm-hmm. But I think something that would have been satisfying and still sort of kept the open ending thing would be to, like, have, like, a parallel with the very beginning, or something that sort of just, like, loops it back around. Right. Because otherwise this felt like just a little bit too, like, oh, the very, very big main conflicts, like the sort of one main conflict sort of got resolved, maybe, depending on how you interpreted it. Because again, there was no words, not really anything to go off of besides, oh, I guess so. So maybe something like that would have been, like, a little more satisfying. But as it was, I could see I was a little bit unsatisfied. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, so life is like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess life is like that,
a little bit unsatisfactory.
Yeah. I don't know. So you said you actually listened to it, right?
Yeah, I listened to a couple parts, I think, on a YouTube channel. I can't remember the name right now, but they had several voice actors for each dialogue part, and I really liked it. I think I did that because reading those text chats were so tedious. it was really just tedious for me, and listening to it was a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. Like, there was, like, a lot of really kind of amazing fan work that was done for it. Definitely a lot of, like, sort of voice actors contributed, lots of amazing fan art stuff. But yeah, so it almost feels it's an end of an era in some ways.
It's over.
It's over forever. But yeah, I know a lot of the fan work. Like, I mean, a lot of the fans too. Like, I guess Toby Fox is arguably a Homestuck fan, and he ended up making Undertale.
Yeah.
And so and I think a lot of the other fans sort of ended up making guest art and guest music and stuff for Homestuck.
I think it's common knowledge now that Toby Fox did the music for Homestuck and also for his game Undertale. So,
and I think someone else, Temi, right?
Yeah, Temi. She did art for the ending, I'm pretty sure, for Homestuck.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I just want to be clear, the ending is, like, visually incredibly impressive. But it is a very, like, sort of not a controversial ending, but one that I think could have been done differently and have been more, like, satisfying to more of the readers. Because I think it would have been impossible to satisfy everyone, because I think everyone took something different out of it just because it was so big of a story that you could take something different out of it. But more people could have, like, had satisfaction, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with that being said, Andrew Hussey has hinted at the possibility of an epilogue being released sometime in the future, and I think the Hive Swap video game is still in the works, so the big game that they kickstarted a couple years ago. So there's a possibility of future closure.
So do you know anything about the Hive Swap video game? Like, what do you know what it's based around? Is it text-based?
Okay, so I do know, so all I know, I've seen, like, I remember, like, looking a little bit into the Kickstarter when it was released, I guess, I want to say, was it 2014? So it was basically going to be, like, like an adventure game, but there hasn't been, like, I haven't seen that much talk about it since since it was funded for over $2 million or something way back in.
Yeah, this says $2,485,000.
Yeah, almost $2.5 million, really.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're looking at the pictures right now. It looks like it was gonna be 3D at some point, but it looks like they've sort of shifted what it's gonna look like a little bit. And
I mean, it definitely captures some of the aspects of the original couple parts that I read. But it definitely includes new artwork, just revamping it basically.
Yeah.
And I haven't actually heard anything about it, but you know, looking at the Kickstarter, it looks like something that would be worthy of 200 or 20,000 backers, but I'm not sure for that amount of money. Like, that is a lot of money.
$2.5 million. That's, yep. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess we'll see. I think it's still in the works, so I'm gonna withhold judgment until it's like, you know, released and everything. Right. So I don't really know what the game's gonna end up looking like. I get the impression that the epilogue might be more relevant to the actual story, and that Hive Swap is sort of more of like an offshoot of it. Because what I'm looking at here is like a character that I don't think is in Homestuck proper. Like, it might be sort of an avatar for the player.
Right, out of the 100 characters or so, it's probably.
So I think the game itself might have like a couple cameos or something, but it might not be like it's probably not going to be the closure that people are looking for in the same way that the epilogue might be. Mm-hmm. That's my theory. But yeah, it was pretty successful. I really wanted these toys, these like
and we're looking at some Homestuck
plushies.
Is it a dragon? I'm not.
Gosh, there was a specific name for them. They were the they were the creatures that Terezi had. But I totally forgotten their names. This was like, I was way into it like almost 4 years ago now.
Hey, they don't have arms, just like some characters, I believe, at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing too. They have arms, I think, in the ending.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they do.
Okay. That's a new thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
To me, as somebody who hasn't read further parts, it's almost felt like they've they grew arms. It almost feels like they've metamorphosized into creatures who happen to have arms.
Yeah. I think they were supposed to have arms. I think just the way the sprites were done, like, they just didn't. But like, there's like, if you see the other drawings and stuff later, like, they do have arms. So I think they're supposed to, but like, it's just not on the sprites.
I mean, it's probably easier to draw multiple frames of a character without arms. I agree. So yeah.
Oh no. Anyway, so.
But yeah, that's our rant about Homestuck, I guess.
Homestuck rant. That was 7 years, guys. 7 long years. Sorry, I'm now thinking about times past, you know.
Now we're just sad.
Rocking on my porch chair. I remember
sad
Homestuck.
Grandmas. So moving on to manga and anime for this season, there's a new anime called Boku no Hero Academia, and it's about a world where supernatural powers become the norm, and not having a superpower is what gets you ostracized. And it just so happens that the young, scrawny protagonist has no superpower, but desperately still wants to be a hero. So his nickname is called Deku, and he basically is this like really weak kid. He like cries a lot, you know, that kind. And he gets bullied a lot because he doesn't have a quirk, and that's what they call it, the superpower. So the manga is very fast paced in comparison to the anime, and it has like a very enjoyable art style and a lot of characters, and they're really colorful and they're really dynamic.
Suyu's best girl.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of those titles that it's kind of like One Punch Man. Actually, I really love One Punch Man, so definitely check it out. And you said you read parts of the manga.
Yeah, I read like the first few chapters, like the first couple volumes worth. And I was also a huge fan of the art style. The characters are really likable. I really like Deku sort of as a main character, even though he's kind of like, you know. I mean, it's not like he's, like, super revolutionary as a main character, like the scrawny guy who learns how to be a hero. Like, it's not, like, you know, not something you've never heard of before, but I still really enjoy him and, like, the characters and everything. And, yeah, I mean, I'm, like, a big fan of, like, shonen, especially, like, at the beginning. Like, I'm always, like, a really big fan of, like, how shonen stuff begins. So I'm really looking forward to the anime, and I think, like, as we were saying, like, the anime is probably going to be a lot more slow paced. And I feel like that's an issue with a lot of anime that is, like, adapted from manga. Usually the usually they do like a 1 chapter per episode type deal, and I think in some ways it might be good just because I think manga gets released a little slower than, or like the way manga's released, it like helps it line up more, but in terms of pacing I think it's like it's a little bit harder.
But I mean, at the same time, because there are so many chapters, kind of like makes you assume that there's gonna be a second season, and I personally think I personally like that, even though the pacing of the anime is excruciatingly slow in comparison to the manga. It's still, I think a lot of fans will be excited about if there was a second season.
Oh, definitely. I don't even think it's a question of if. I think like because it's like the manga's pretty popular, I get the impression that they're probably already like probably in the talks for a second season.
Nice.
Probably, I assume. Yeah. Unless like the anime does like especially badly, but I think because it's doing pretty well, like the manga, I imagine they're planning for a second season.
Yeah. And I just want to talk about a manga, or sorry, not a manga, but an anime that was airing last season, Erased. Erased was great. I really liked it, and some people didn't because they didn't find the plot to be as interesting, but I personally did like it. It was if anybody doesn't know, it's about a young boy, or rather it's about a 20-year-old who happens to be able to go back in time and correct mistakes. That's what he thinks is supposed to be the purpose of going back in time, and he tries to basically solve multiple murder cases. And that's basically it's pretty unique. There's not a lot of crime anime, I believe, that is as well thought out, well planned, and interesting, thought-provoking as this. And yeah, I really liked it. Charlotte, did you watch that?
I did not watch that one, actually. I heard like a lot of pretty like good things about it, and like from your plot I'm like, wow, I really want to watch that. But yeah, I hadn't seen it myself yet. But it's on my list, like my probably pages long list at this point. But
right, yeah. Of course, everyone's page long lists.
Yeah. But yeah, is that one like done? Is it like, or is it also going on a second season? Or?
I have no idea. I think the anime is over. But yeah.
I'll check it out then. I like it when things are done, so I don't have to like wait for the ending. So in video game news, the makers of the game Honeypop just recently came out with a new game called Huniecam Studio. It is a not-safe-for-work business tycoon game focusing on expanding your camgirl pimp business. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know what Honeypop is, Honeypop, I guess, can be described best as like a dating sim meets Bejeweled / Candy Crush type game. Right. So you're a girl or guy who is not super lucky in love, you could say, and like you get a fairy who comes to visit you, is that right? And the fairy basically helps you like score chicks, and
basically
and then through your skills at Candy Crush you like can have sex with ladies.
But wait, don't forget that it's not just Candy Crush. You have to, one of the interesting parts about the game that I thought was hilarious is that she tells you facts about like how much she weighs, for example, and then later on she'll ask you the same question and you have no idea. You're like, oh shit, like you feel like that guy who doesn't know that information about you. You're like, man, I am a terrible boyfriend. You're like, I'm flirting with like 8 girls at once and I don't know what this girl's weight is, and you feel so bad.
Yeah, that's right. They like ask you a bunch of questions. It's like pop quiz.
It's pretty funny.
But yeah. No, and then like to be fair, it's not just Candy Crush or Bejeweled or like those. There is a little bit of strategy that goes into it because you can update your stats, right? You can like update your like luck or sexuality stats.
Oh, I had no idea.
And that changes a little bit of how the game is played. And then I think you can also like use power-ups and stuff within the game, and that'll help. Like, I mean, to be fair, there's power-ups in Candy Crush too. So maybe Candy Crush is a better game than you guys think it is. Gosh. Anyway. That being said, I don't know if you guys know, but I love like those stupid mobile games. Like I'm I mean, some people have called it an addiction, but I just call it like an affinity. I just
an affinity.
Yeah, I just play them a lot daily.
Right.
Every hour. Anyway. But yeah, so but generally, that being said, Honeypop was pretty well received. And in contrast, I think the new Huniecam Studio has had a couple mixed reviews. So I've heard so the game itself is like, if I understand correctly, you're like a sort of a pimp, and then you're like you can recruit girls to your business, to your camp studio. Yeah. Well,
in quotes.
Yeah, so you recruit girls to your camp studio business, and then some of those girls can be like the original girls that were in Honeypop, and then there's a couple like new girls.
Oh wait, are you serious?
Yeah, there's a couple like new girls.
No, I mean like they're from the original game.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, definitely like
Man, you gotta think like what happened, like
I know
some of those girls.
Hun, what happened? You were a teacher, like you had stuff going for you.
Man.
Yeah, so I think there is like also a little bit of controversy surrounding like how sex work was treated within both games, I guess. So I think there is actually technically kind of like a sex worker within Honeypop itself. I don't know if it counts as a sex worker. I think does it ever say if she's like a porn star or like a cam girl or
I don't really remember. I just remember that I hit it off really well with her.
Yeah. Yeah, so she was, I think her name was Jessie, and I thought she was kind of one of the more fun characters in it. Like she was probably like, I liked answering her questions. And so she's an adult actress, I think is her official job. And she definitely kind of hits like the stereotypes that you would associate, right? Like she has a child really young, and she, I think, she's apparently done, or she's made poor life choices, you know, in quotation marks.
Right.
So there is like, they have like a couple stereotypes linked to that. But that being said, I did think that like her portrayal was not as bad as it could have been, because they do like sort of humanize her in some ways by showing sort of different parts of her personality a little bit, by like showing her friendships with other girls in the game, and also like they do sort of delve a little bit into her strained relationship with her daughter. So I think she does have like it's not that she's like a super deep character, but she does have like a little more dimension than the girls in Huniecam Studio do. And I think that was I feel like, so the only things that you really know about the girls in the Huniecam Studio like game is like what fetishes they fulfill, so that you have like little labels like Latina and like MILF and things like that. So
right,
that's like okay, all right, cool.
Right. And you were saying that the power-ups were like cocaine.
Yeah, so you can also like give your girls cocaine, and they will do things half the time. I
mean, honestly,
so that's lovely.
Yeah, I wouldn't be as bothered by the game if it was just like the girls were like, you know, dictating their own work schedules and choosing to do it on their own. But because it's like a pimp business, it's really just kind of like puts this new aspect that it's like, I mean, are we gonna really doubt? It's obviously a guy who's like running this business, and I'm like, it's marketed towards guys. Yeah. So it's not like, you know, sensitive in any way towards what, you know.
No, definitely not.
Well, obviously not. So that's kind of like the critique there.
Yeah, I just feel like, I think the reason that Honeypop might come across better in that regard is because even if it does use like stereotypes, like there was at least somewhat of an effort to like, you know, make Jessie seem like a person, whereas this is literally just you're literally like trying to milk these girls of what they're worth in terms of like fans, quote unquote. Like that's the goal of the game, is to like make as much money and have as many fans as possible. Like that's sort of your end goal, is to like get those two things as much as possible. And so in a way you're almost encouraged to like sort of want to like pay them less, as like almost as little as possible, so you can get power-ups where like, like if she spent, or like you can give her like a piggy bank or something, and then she'll like ask for less money and stuff like that.
Oh wow.
So like power-ups like that, like, you know, I feel it makes me feel like the subject could have been handled with a little more tact.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I think you know, overall it's kind of like supposed to be controversial because it's controversial. Like, it kind of does this, like, you know, we're gonna make a game about pimps, and, you know, we're gonna make it as you know, lewd or whatever as possible, and they take it with, you know, good humor. But you know, there are some reviews that have said, like, for example, this one I got off of Steam: a lot of fellow cam girls are highly offended by the over-the-top negative stereotypes that are portrayed in the game, the addiction and STD themes especially, but also calling the fans disgusting. And this was by Amber Cutie. So I definitely feel like this is
yeah, I mean, I'm like, if you've seen the original Honey Pop, you probably weren't expecting like an incredibly like thorough and like hard-hitting like critique of the cam studio business. 'Cause I mean, I think everyone I sort of knew what it was going to be when I heard about it and like saw the trailer. The trailer does not, like, I don't think it makes pretenses about what it's supposed to be, but I also find that, like, you know, I think Amber Cutie does have a point that there is, like, you know, the fact that they even bring up like stuff like, oh, drug addiction and stuff like that, and just sort of like as a joke almost, it does, like, I think it is something that deserves criticism, even if it's like, you know,
that's true.
Even if people know that it's like sort of supposed to be taken like tongue-in-cheek a little bit.
I think it's unfortunate that a lot of games, they're not even expected to bring about, like, you know, a new facet or like something like outstanding in feminist like literature, or like, you know, trying to like disprove some stereotype, but, you know, their market is largely not concerned with that. They're not concerned with how women are, you know, mistreated in the cam business or in the porn industry. And God, don't want to get into that. There's like too much about that, but there's so many issues and we're not delving into those. So
yeah, I'll be interested. So I think the game really came out super recently, so I'll be interested to see like what more people say as they play it. I haven't played it myself. I just saw like a couple like gameplay videos and like the trailers and like things like that. So I can't speak like myself, like what I personally thought. I'm just like, I can see sort of why it would, like, from what I saw of the gameplay, why that might garner criticism a little bit. But as more people play it, I'll be interested to see what general consensus ends up being.
So this week on Personal Recommendations, I personally recommend everyone read the comic Sakana by Madeline Rupert, a grad student at SCAD. From her website, sakana-comic.com, I pulled the following. Sakana is a slice-of-life romantic comedy that takes place in a giant fish market in Tokyo, Japan. Our intrepid heroes must do battle with unruly seafood and themselves in order to find love, inner peace, and a paycheck. So Sakana has a beautiful, mostly blue and like shades of blue color scheme, and the panels are I think it's 4 or 5, I can't really remember, but it is beautifully done. The characters are interesting, and I find that it's a really calm paced, really one of those things you read when you want time out of your life, not escapism, because it's more like thoughtful. You really process it and you enjoy the piece. So Charlotte, have you read any of Sakana?
I read a little bit. It's been a while since I've read it, so it's hard to sort of remember what I thought of it. I remember liking it, but yeah, definitely it's pretty widely acclaimed. I think a lot of people really enjoyed it too. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking it out as well, because it's definitely got its following for sure. So as for my personal recommendation, so this week I recommend Kaoru Mori's Emma. So this manga just got re-released in English, and it's the story of a maid in Victorian England named Emma and her romance with a wealthy merchant named William. So the story itself is sort of kind of a run-of-the-mill historical romance that you might expect. Like, there's a big class difference between the two of them, and it ends up being an issue for both of them, and that's sort of where the main conflict of the story lies. But what sets it apart from other stories of its ilk is the amazing attention to historical detail. So the author is a huge fan, I think, of Victorian England, and you can see the love of Victorian England like poured out into the pages, like huge amount of detail in the costumes, in the drawings of London, and also there's a lot of like small details within the story that even though they're not like the main part of the story, like characters I think went to like the Crystal Palace and things like that. So it's just like small details like that really just help you immerse you in the story. And yeah, so if you're a fan, by the way, of historical manga like that, I would also recommend checking out the next work that she made, A Bride Story, that was also, I think, released in English, and I think its 7th volume is released in English now. And so that's set in 19th century Central Asia, and that's like also amazingly beautiful, incredibly detailed, and I cannot recommend both of those works enough. Super, super amazing.
Thank you so much for that recommendation, Charlotte, and thank you for listening to this week's Honey Tomato podcast. If you have any recommendations at all, please send them to @milkytart on twitter.com, and if you want, you can email it to milkytart@gmail.com. So thank you so much for listening, and see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening.
Copyright 2016 by Helen Ni and Charlotte Gauthier.